The stars above Mars Colony 7 looked the same as they always did. Captain Tae Sung stood at the observation window drinking his morning coffee. He had been stationed on Mars for 3 years now, watching over mining operations and keeping the peace. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. That morning changed everything. The alarm system started screaming at exactly 0600 hours. Tai Sung dropped his coffee cup and ran to the command center. His crew was already there, staring at the screens with wide eyes. Lieutenant Hana turned to him, her face pale. "Sir, we have multiple contacts entering the solar system. They're not ours." Tae Sung looked at the radar display. Dozens of ships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, heading straight for Earth. His heart started beating faster. "Are they answering our hails?" he asked. Hana shook her head. "No response to any frequency? They're just coming." On Earth, Colonel Ji-woo was having her own terrible morning. She worked in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, deep underground in Geneva. The reports from Mars came through, and she immediately called an emergency meeting. The top military minds of humanity gathered in the war room within minutes. "What do we know about them?" asked General Park, the oldest person in the room. Ji-woo pulled up holographic images on the main screen. "Not much. They appeared at the edge of our solar system 2 hours ago. Current speed suggests they'll reach Earth orbit in 36 hours. We've tried every form of communication. Nothing." "Could they be peaceful?" someone asked. Ji-woo didn't answer. She didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew the history books. When two civilizations met for the first time, things rarely went well for the weaker one. And humanity had no idea how strong these visitors were. The alien ships reached Earth orbit exactly when predicted. They formed a perfect ring around the planet, blocking out sections of the sky. People on the ground looked up in fear and wonder. Some prayed, some took pictures, some started running. Then the message came. It wasn't in any human language, but the aliens had done their homework. They had studied Earth's broadcasts, learned the major languages, and prepared a speech. Every screen on Earth, every phone, every computer suddenly showed the same thing, a massive creature that looked like an insect crossed with a nightmare. It stood 3 meters tall, covered in thick black armor that seemed to absorb light. 4 arms ended in claws that could tear through steel. Its head had too many eyes, all of them looking down at humanity with something like contempt. "Humans of Earth," the creature said in perfect English. "I am War Leader Thax of the Vraxian Dominion, speaking for the Galactic Council. We have studied your world. We have analyzed your species. We find you lacking." Ji-woo watched the broadcast from the war room. Her hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough to hurt. "Your bodies are weak," Thax continued. "Your skin tears easily. Your bones break under pressure. You cannot survive in extreme heat or cold. You fight among yourselves over trivial matters. You are divided, fragile, and primitive." The creature leaned closer to the camera. "The Galactic Council has decided. Earth will become a protectorate. You will surrender all weapons. You will accept our guidance. You will serve. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. You have 24 hours to respond." The screens went black. For a moment, the entire planet was silent. Then the chaos began. People panicked in the streets. Governments argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight even though it seemed hopeless. In the war room, Ji-woo looked at the files her intelligence team had compiled. The aliens had sent a more detailed message to Earth's governments, outlining exactly why they thought humans would be easy to conquer. She read through it, her face getting darker with each page. The report was thorough. Humans had no natural armor, no claws or fangs. No ability to survive in space without technology. Average human strength was laughably weak compared to most spacefaring species. Human weapons were primitive, barely beyond chemical rockets and nuclear fission. The aliens had antimatter weapons, energy shields, and ships that could destroy planets. On paper, it wasn't even a contest. "What do we do?" General Park asked quietly. Ji-woo looked up at him. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "They think we're weak because we're soft," she said. "They don't understand what made us soft in the first place." She pulled up Earth's history on the main screen. Thousands of years of warfare flashed past. Ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval sieges, world wars that killed millions. Humanity had been fighting and killing each other since before recorded history. "They have armor," Ji-woo said. "We have tactics. They have strength. We have strategy. They evolved on a world where being strong was enough. We evolved on a world where being smart was the only way to survive." She turned to her staff. "Send orders to all military units. Protocol Serpent is now active. Evacuate major cities through the underground networks. Move all combat units to prepared positions. And get me Captain Tae-sung from Mars Colony. We're going to need every soldier we have." Back on Mars, Tae-sung received his orders. Protocol Serpent. He had studied it during training, but never thought he would actually see it used. It was the plan for fighting an enemy you couldn't beat in open combat. A plan based on guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. "Sir, are we really going to fight them?" Hana asked. She looked scared, but determined. Tae-sung looked at his crew. Young men and women who had signed up to protect humanity. They weren't super soldiers. They didn't have special powers. They were just people with all the weaknesses the aliens had listed. But they were human. And humans had something the aliens didn't understand yet. "Yes," Tae-sung said. "We're going to fight, and we're going to show them exactly what humans are capable of." The 24 hours passed. Earth's governments sent their response to the Vraxian Dominion. It was short and simple. No. Thax received the message aboard his flagship. He almost laughed. These primitive creatures actually thought they could resist. Very well, he would teach them their place in the galactic order. He gave the command, and the Vraxian fleet began their descent to Earth's surface. Thousands of warriors in powered armor, riding in ships that could level cities. They expected to overwhelm humanity in days, maybe hours. They had no idea what was waiting for them below. The Vraxian assault ships roared through the morning sky over Seoul. Sergeant Dong-hyun watched them from his position in a collapsed building, 3 blocks from City Hall. He counted 27 ships, each one carrying at least 50 warriors, over 1,000 aliens about to land in his city. He pressed the radio button on his helmet. "All units, this is Wolf Leader. They're coming in hot. Remember your training. Let them land. Let them group up. Then we hit them." Across the city, hundreds of soldiers confirmed his orders. They were hidden in buildings, tunnels, subway stations, and parking garages. The civilian population had been evacuated 3 days ago through underground passages that the aliens didn't know existed. What looked like a living city from orbit was actually an empty trap. The Vraxian ships landed in the main plaza. Thax had chosen Seoul for the first assault because it was a major city with millions of people. He wanted to break human morale early. His warriors poured out of the ships, their black armor gleaming in the sunlight. They formed perfect military formations, waiting for orders. Thax stepped onto Earth soil for the first time. He expected to see humans running in panic. Instead, he saw empty streets, abandoned cars, silence. "Spread out," he commanded. "Find the humans. Bring them to the plaza for processing." His warriors moved into the city in groups of 10. They were efficient, trained, and confident. Each one was strong enough to tear a human in half. Their armor could stop any bullet that humans possessed. They had energy weapons that could melt steel. This would be easy. Private Jae-ho watched the first group of aliens walk past his position. He was hiding in what used to be a coffee shop, now just broken windows and overturned furniture. His hands shook as he gripped his rifle. He was only 20 years old. He had been in the military for less than a year. The aliens walked down the middle of the street, not worried about ambushes. Why would they be? They were unstoppable. Dong Hyun's voice came through the radio. Unit 7, you are cleared to engage. Make it count. Jae-ho took a deep breath. He had trained for this moment, but training was different from real combat. These were actual aliens trying to conquer his planet, his home. His family had evacuated south 3 days ago. They were counting on him. He squeezed the trigger. The explosion came from below the aliens, not from the sides. Dong Hyun's team had spent weeks rigging the streets with mines and explosives. The entire city was a minefield, carefully mapped so human soldiers knew where to step. The aliens didn't. The blast threw 3 Vraxians into the air. Their armor protected them from the worst of it, but they were stunned and separated. That's when Jae-ho and his team opened fire. The bullets didn't penetrate the alien armor, but they didn't have to. Dong Hyun had taught them to aim for the joints, the gaps where the armor plates met, the weak points. The aliens roared in pain and confusion as rounds found their vulnerable spots. More explosions echoed across the city. Every group of aliens walking into Seoul was hitting the same traps. The Vraxians were strong and well-armored, but they were also predictable. They moved in standard military formations, used standard tactics, and expected their enemy to fight in standard ways. Humans had stopped fighting standard wars thousands of years ago. Major Yuna watched the battle from an underground command center. She was in charge of engineering and had designed most of the traps now tearing apart the alien forces. Her team had turned ordinary civilian infrastructure into weapons. The subway system was her masterpiece. The aliens didn't know that Seoul had hundreds of kilometers of tunnels under the streets. Human soldiers could move anywhere in the city without being seen. They could pop up, attack, and disappear before the aliens could respond. "How are we doing?" Dong Hyun asked, sliding into the command center after pulling back from his position. Yuna pointed at the tactical display. "We've eliminated or injured about 30% of their ground forces. They're getting angry, though. They're starting to use heavier weapons." As if to prove her point, an explosion shook the ground above them. The aliens had started firing their energy weapons at buildings, trying to flush out the hidden humans. Unfortunately for them, most buildings in the combat zone were already rigged to collapse. Dong Hyun smiled grimly. "Let them knock down the buildings. Just gives us more cover and makes it harder for them to move. What about the chemical surprise?" "Ready when you are," Yuna said. Dong Hyun nodded and gave the order. Across the city, soldiers opened valves in hidden pipes. Seoul had many factories and industrial facilities. Yuna had connected them all into a network that could pump various chemicals through the street-level drainage systems. The Vraxians didn't notice the mist at first. It was just a slight haze in the air, probably from all the explosions. But then their armor started smoking. The chemical mix Yuna had created was highly corrosive, designed specifically to eat through the composite materials the aliens used. Thax watched in disbelief as his warriors' armor began to fail. Some of them were taking their helmets off, trying to breathe, which was a fatal mistake. The mist wasn't poisonous to humans in small doses, but the aliens had different biology. Several collapsed, their respiratory systems shutting down. "Pull back to the plaza!" Thax roared. "Defensive positions!" But pulling back meant moving through streets full of traps. The Vraxians lost more warriors on the retreat than they had in the initial attack. The humans let them retreat, not out of mercy, but because they wanted the aliens grouped together in one place. In the plaza, Thax tried to count his remaining forces. He had started with over 1,000 warriors. Now he had maybe 600 still combat effective. How? How had these weak, primitive creatures hurt him so badly? The answer came from above, but not from the sky. Private J-Ho and his unit had climbed to the top of the surrounding buildings during the retreat. Now they had the high ground, looking down on the aliens in the plaza. "Fire!" Dong-hyun commanded. The humans weren't using normal bullets anymore. They had switched to rockets, grenades, and heavy weapons. The aliens' shields protected them from above, but shields took energy. And the humans had a lot of ammunition. For 3 hours, they bombarded the plaza. The aliens couldn't retreat because all routes were trapped or blocked. They couldn't stay because they were being torn apart from above. They tried calling for support from their ships, but Yuna's team had been busy there too. Surface-to-air missiles fired from hidden launchers across the city streaked toward the Vraxian ships. The ships' shields held against the first wave, and the second. But the humans kept firing. They had been building weapons for decades, storing them for a threat that might never come. Now that threat was here, and humanity was going to use every single weapon they had. 2 Vraxian ships exploded. The others began lifting off, abandoning the ground forces. Thax couldn't believe it. His own fleet was retreating, leaving him and his warriors to die. Dong-hyun's voice echoed across the plaza, amplified through the city's emergency broadcast system. He spoke in Korean first, then in English. "Attention Vraxian forces. You are surrounded. Your ships have abandoned you. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the rules of war. Fight, and you will die. You have 5 minutes to decide." Thax looked at his remaining warriors. They were exhausted, injured, and demoralized. They had been told this would be easy, a quick conquest of a weak species. Instead, they had walked into a nightmare of explosives, chemicals, and ambushes. The humans had turned their own city into a weapon. They had sacrificed their buildings, their streets, their infrastructure just to kill invaders. What kind of species did that? Thax made his decision. He raised his weapon and fired at the nearest building, trying to kill at least one more human before he died. But his weapon was out of power, drained by hours of fighting. He dropped it and fell to his knees. Around the plaza, other Vraxians did the same. They surrendered. Human soldiers emerged from their hiding spots, weapons ready. They moved carefully, professionally, taking the aliens into custody. Medics came forward to treat the wounded, both human and alien. J-Ho walked past one of the captured Vraxians. The alien looked at him with all its eyes, trying to understand. This human was small, young, and looked exhausted. But he had fought like a demon. They all had. Major Yuna stood next to Dong-hyun, watching the cleanup operation. They had won, but at a cost. Parts of Seoul were destroyed. Dozens of human soldiers were dead or wounded, but they had defeated a force that should have crushed them easily. "Think they learned their lesson?" Yuna asked. Dong-hyun looked at the captured aliens, then up at the sky where the remaining Vraxian ships were fleeing. "Maybe. Or maybe we just made them angry." He was right. In orbit, the Vraxian fleet commanders were sending urgent messages to the Galactic Council. They had lost the Battle of Seoul. The humans were far more dangerous than anyone had predicted. This wasn't going to be a quick conquest. This was going to be a real war. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 47 species argued and shouted at each other. On the main screen, footage from Seoul played on repeat. Vraxian warriors, supposedly the finest soldiers in the galaxy, surrendering to humans. Humans who weren't supposed to be capable of real resistance. Council leader Vex, a tall, crystalline being from the core worlds, called for order. His voice echoed through the chamber like broken glass. "Silence! We need to understand what happened. War leader Thax, explain how you lost an entire battalion to a primitive species." Thax stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing his damaged armor. He had been pulled from Earth for this emergency meeting. His pride was wounded more than his body. "They knew we were coming," he said. "They evacuated their civilians. They prepared the battlefield. They used their own city as a weapon against us." Impossible, said a council member from the Kelthian Empire. Our intelligence showed humans are individualistic and disorganized. They fight among themselves constantly. They should have been arguing about whether to resist, not preparing coordinated defenses. Your intelligence was wrong, Thax said flatly. That's when Commander Hyun Woo walked into the chamber. He was Earth's diplomatic representative, though diplomat wasn't really the right word. He was a military officer first, sent to speak for humanity because he was the only one willing to come into potential enemy territory. The council members stared at him. He was so small compared to most of them. His body looked fragile, held together with nothing but soft skin and thin bones. How had creatures like this defeated Vraxian warriors? Commander Hyunwoo, Vex said carefully, perhaps you can explain your species' unexpected capabilities. Hyunwoo smiled. He had prepared for this moment. He pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. You want to know why we're dangerous? He asked. Let me show you. The hologram displayed Earth, rotating slowly. Then images began appearing around it. Ancient humans hunting mammoths with spears. Roman legions conquering half a continent. Medieval sieges lasting years. Naval battles with wooden ships and cannons. Trenches full of soldiers in the First World War. Mushroom clouds rising over cities in the Second World War. We've been fighting for 10,000 years, Hyunwoo said quietly. Not against other species, against each other. We've developed tactics, strategies, and weapons specifically designed to kill other humans. Because humans are smart, adaptable, and creative. We had to be, to survive. The council watched in silence as the images continued. Tank battles, aerial dogfights, guerrilla warfare in jungles, urban combat in destroyed cities. The sheer variety of human warfare was staggering. You have armor, Hyunwoo continued. That's good against species who fight with claws and strength. But we've been fighting armored enemies since we invented arrows. We learned to find weak points, to use explosives, to create weapons that go around armor instead of through it. A new image appeared. Human soldiers through the ages. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but survivors, adapting to every terrain, every climate, every enemy. Your intelligence was right about one thing, Hyunwoo said. We are fragile. Our skin tears easily. Our bones break. We can't survive extreme temperatures. But do you know why we're fragile? He zoomed in on Earth, showing its varied environments. Deserts, jungles, frozen tundras, mountains, oceans. We evolved on a death world, a planet where everything was trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, weather. Even the plants were poisonous. We survived not by being strong, but by being smart. We made tools. We worked together. We thought of ways to kill things bigger and stronger than us. The hologram showed ancient humans taking down a massive predator using coordination and simple weapons. You know what humans call that? Hyunwoo asked. Hunting. It's entertainment for us now. We do it for fun. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Meanwhile, above Earth's orbit, Admiral Sujin was revealing another surprise. The Vraxian fleet had pulled back, expecting to regroup and plan a new assault. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by human ships, not civilian vessels or orbital stations, warships. Dozens of them appearing from behind the moon, from asteroid fields, from positions throughout the solar system. The Vraxian admiral, Krath, stared at his screens in confusion. Where did these come from? Our intelligence said humans had no military fleet. His sensor officer looked terrified. Sir, they were hidden. Disguised as mining ships and research stations, they've been building this fleet in secret for decades. Sujin's voice came through on all frequencies. Vraxian vessels, this is Admiral Sujin of the United Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender, or we will open fire. Krath almost laughed. These humans in their primitive ships thought they could threaten Vraxian cruisers? But then his tactical officer showed him the weapon readings. Sir, they have antimatter warheads, nuclear fusion torpedoes, railguns that can punch through our shields, and something we've never seen before, some kind of directed energy weapon. That's impossible, Krath said. They shouldn't have this technology. They do, the officer replied, and they're powering weapons. Sir, they're not bluffing. Back on Earth, Dr. Bora stood in a medical facility with several captured Vraxian warriors. She was a xenobiologist, studying the aliens to understand their weaknesses. But she was also there to talk to them, to help them understand what they were facing. One Vraxian, called Dren, spoke to her through a translator. Why do you bother healing us? We came to conquer you. We would have enslaved your people. Bora finished bandaging a wound on Dren's arm. Because we're human. We can be brutal in war, but we also believe in mercy. It's part of what makes us complicated. Complicated? Dren repeated. You are weak. Your bodies are fragile. How did you defeat us? Bora sat down across from him. Let me tell you about humans. We evolved on a planet where 5 major extinction events killed most life. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years, diseases that wiped out entire populations, predators that hunted us, and we survived all of it. She pulled up images on her tablet, showing him Earth's brutal history. We survived because we could adapt. A predator too strong to fight. We made traps, climate too cold. We made fire and clothing, disease killing our people. We developed medicine. We didn't just react to problems. We anticipated them. We prepared for threats that didn't exist yet. That's why you were ready for us, Dren realized. Exactly. Humans have been preparing for hostile aliens since we first looked at the stars. Every science fiction story, every military exercise, every what-if scenario. We've been planning this war for 100 years, even though we didn't know who we'd be fighting. She showed him footage of human endurance tests. Soldiers marching for days without sleep. People surviving in extreme conditions. Athletes pushing their bodies past natural limits through sheer willpower. You're right that we're physically weaker than you, Bora admitted. But we have something you don't. We can ignore pain. We can push through fear. We can keep fighting even when our bodies are telling us to stop. Your species is stronger, but ours is more stubborn. In space, Lieutenant Min Seok was proving exactly that. He led a boarding team onto a damaged Vraxian cruiser. The aliens had refused to surrender, so the humans were taking the ship by force. The fighting was brutal. In the narrow corridors of the ship, the Vraxian strength was less useful. Min Seok's team used flashbang grenades, tear gas, and close-quarters combat tactics. They fought for 18 hours straight, room by room, deck by deck. The Vraxian defenders couldn't understand it. These humans should be exhausted. They should be collapsing from fatigue. Instead, they kept coming, like machines that couldn't be stopped. What the aliens didn't know was that humans had been training for this. Soldiers who could operate for days without sleep, using stimulants and sheer determination. It wasn't healthy, but it was effective. When the cruiser finally surrendered, Min Seok's team looked like they had been through hell. They were covered in bruises, exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline. But they had won. Back in the council chamber, Hyunwoo finished his presentation. The holograms faded, leaving just him standing alone before the galaxy's most powerful beings. So now you understand, he said. You thought we were weak because we're soft, but we're soft because we didn't need armor or claws or natural weapons. We had something better: intelligence, creativity, and the absolute refusal to give up. He looked directly at Vex. You wanted to make Earth a protectorate, to guide us, to make us serve. That was a mistake. Not because we're strong, but because we're desperate. Humanity knows what it's like to be weak. We've been the underdog in every fight we've ever had. And we've learned that the underdog wins by fighting dirty, thinking creatively, and never, ever surrendering. The council chamber was silent. They were beginning to understand the terrible truth. They hadn't awakened a sleeping warrior race. They had poked a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill things stronger than itself. And now that species had starships, antimatter weapons, and was very, very angry. General Sang-Woo stood in the war room, looking at a map of the galaxy. Red markers showed Vraxian positions. Blue markers showed human forces. 3 weeks ago, all the blue markers had been in the solar system. Now, they were spreading. "Total war," he said to his staff officers. "That's what we're going to show them." The younger officers looked confused. One of them, a lieutenant named Han, raised his hand. "Sir, what exactly is total war?" Sang-Woo smiled grimly. "It's a human concept. Most species fight over territory or resources. They battle until one side wins, then they negotiate. But humans learned a long time ago that wars aren't won by battles. They're won by breaking the enemy's will to fight." He pointed at the map. "The Vraxians have supply lines stretching across 3 star systems. They have communication networks. They have colonies that provide food, materials, and new soldiers. We're going to destroy all of it." "But sir," Han protested, "that would mean attacking civilian targets." "No," Sang-Woo corrected. "We'll give them warning. We'll tell them to evacuate. Then we'll destroy the infrastructure. Factories, spaceports, communication relays. Everything that makes their war machine work. We're not monsters. But we are going to make them realize that fighting humanity costs more than they're willing to pay." The plan went into action immediately. Human ships, moving faster than the Vraxians expected, hit supply convoys. Captain Yoon-ji commanded a stealth frigate called the Silent Wind. Her ship was small, fast, and nearly invisible to enemy sensors. "Target acquired," her sensor officer reported. "Vraxian supply ship carrying food and ammunition to their forward base." Yoon-ji studied the tactical display. The supply ship had 2 escorts, both armed. A fair fight would be suicide, so she wouldn't fight fair. "Move us into position behind that asteroid," she ordered. "We'll wait until they pass, then hit them from behind." Her crew followed orders precisely. The Silent Wind slipped through space like a ghost, using the asteroid field for cover. When the Vraxian convoy passed, Yoon-ji struck. Torpedoes launched from the Silent Wind, streaking toward the supply ship. The escorts tried to react, but they were too slow. The supply ship exploded, scattering debris across space. Before the escorts could locate the Silent Wind, Yoon-ji's ship had already vanished into the asteroid field. "Sir, they're searching for us," the sensor officer said. "Should we engage?" "No," Yoon-ji replied. "We're not here to fight battles. We're here to make them paranoid. Let them waste fuel and time searching. We'll hit the next convoy tomorrow." This same scene played out across Vraxian space. Human ships appeared, struck, and disappeared. Supply lines became dangerous. Communication relays got destroyed. Vraxian commanders started seeing human attacks everywhere, even when there were none. It was psychological warfare, and humans had perfected it over centuries. Sergeant Woo Jin ran a different kind of operation. He was part of psychological operations, or PsyOps. His job was to mess with the enemy's mind, to make them doubt and fear. He sat in a small room filled with computers, broadcasting messages into Vraxian communication networks. The messages were simple, but effective. "Attention Vraxian soldiers. Why are you fighting? Your leaders said this would be easy. They lied. How many of your friends have died? How many more will die before your commanders admit they were wrong?" The messages included footage from Seoul. Vraxian warriors surrendering, injured, defeated. Woo Jin made sure every Vraxian soldier saw what had happened to their comrades. But he did more than that. He also sent fake messages pretending to be Vraxian commanders. Retreat from Sector 7. Supply shipment delayed indefinitely. High Command questioning your loyalty. The Vraxian military started to fracture. Units didn't know which orders were real. Some commanders thought their own headquarters was lying to them. Trust broke down. Wu Jin's most effective operation was the rumor campaign. He spread stories about human weapons that didn't exist, planet-killing bombs, biological weapons that only affected Vraxians, nanomachines that could eat through ship hulls. None of it was true, but the Vraxians didn't know that. They started taking precautions against imaginary threats, wasting resources and time. "Is this ethical?" one of Wu Jin's team members asked. "We're lying to them." Wu Jin looked at her seriously. "They came to enslave us. They attacked our planet without warning. This is war. And in war, making the enemy afraid is better than making them dead. Fear ends wars. Death just creates more fighting." Private Da Yun had a different job. She was a combat medic, but she was also showing the Vraxians something they didn't expect: human compassion. In a field hospital near the front lines, she treated wounded soldiers from both sides. Human soldiers who had been injured in battle lay in beds next to Vraxian prisoners. Dayun moved between them, checking vitals, administering medicine, talking quietly. One Vraxian warrior, named Kess, watched her with confusion. She had just finished bandaging his wounds, even though he was the enemy. "Why help me?" he asked through the translator. "I was trying to kill your people." Da-Yun looked at him while cleaning her hands. "Because you're not trying to kill anyone right now. Right now, you're just injured and in pain. And I'm a doctor. I took an oath to help people, not to judge them." She moved to the next bed, where a human soldier was recovering from surgery. She checked his bandages and spoke to him quietly, making sure he was comfortable. Then she went back to checking on Kess. "I don't understand humans," Kess admitted. "In Seoul, your soldiers fought like demons. They killed my squad mates without mercy. But now you treat me like I matter." "We're complicated," Dawoon said. "We can be brutal when we need to be. But we're also capable of mercy. Both things are true at the same time." She sat down next to his bed. "Can I tell you something? Most humans didn't want this war. We have problems of our own. Climate change, poverty, political disagreements. But you forced us to unite. You made us remember that we're all human, and we'll protect each other from outside threats." "So we created our own enemy," Kess said bitterly. "Yes, and now your leaders have a choice. Keep fighting and lose more soldiers, or make peace and let us all go back to our lives." The message spread through Vraxian prisoner camps. Humans were fierce warriors, but they weren't monsters. They followed rules. They treated prisoners well. They even showed respect to their enemies. It confused the Vraxian military leadership. How do you fight an enemy that acts honorably? How do you demonize them to your troops when they're showing mercy? In space, Admiral Su Jin pressed her advantage. The human fleet had grown as more ships finished construction in hidden shipyards. She now commanded over 100 warships, and she was taking the fight to the Vraxians. "Admiral, we're approaching the Vraxian forward base in the Kepler 442 system," her tactical officer reported. Su Jin studied the display. The base was heavily defended with orbital stations and minefields. A direct assault would be costly, so she wouldn't attack directly. "Launch the drones," she ordered. Hundreds of small, unmanned ships flew toward the base. The Vraxians opened fire, destroying them easily. But that was the point. While the Vraxians focused on the drones, human ships moved into position. Fire rail guns, target their communication array. Metal slugs traveling at a fraction of light speed smashed into the base's communication systems. Suddenly, the Vraxian defenders couldn't coordinate. Each station had to fight independently. That's when Su Jin sent in her real attack. Marines in boarding pods launched from hidden positions. They crashed into the disabled stations, taking them one by one. The Vraxian base commander tried to call for reinforcements, but his communications were down. He tried to coordinate his defenders, but they couldn't hear his orders. Within 6 hours, the base had fallen. Su Jin didn't destroy it. Instead, she left a garrison of human soldiers to hold it. The base became a human outpost. Deep in Vraxian territory, the message was clear. Earth wasn't just defending anymore, they were conquering. Back on Earth, General Sang Woo received reports from all fronts. The war was going better than expected. Vraxian supply lines were disrupted, their communications were compromised, morale was falling, and human forces were capturing territory. But he knew this couldn't last. The Vraxians were part of a galactic empire. Eventually, they would bring in more forces, more ships, more soldiers, unless humanity convinced them it wasn't worth it. "Send a message to the Vraxian High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we're willing to negotiate, but make it clear, we're negotiating from a position of strength, not weakness. They attacked us. We've proven we can fight back. Now they can choose peace, or they can choose more war. But if they choose war, we'll bring it to every system they control." The message was sent. Now humanity waited to see if the Vraxians would be smart enough to accept peace, or proud enough to keep fighting. Either way, humans were ready. They had been preparing for this war for 100 years, even without knowing it. Every military exercise, every weapons development, every tactical innovation had been leading to this moment. The Vraxians thought they were fighting a weak species. They were learning the hard way that weakness and strength were relative terms, and in the calculus of war, determination and intelligence could matter more than claws and armor. The Treaty of Geneva was signed on a cold morning in March, 6 months after the war began. Ambassador Kyung-soo stood in the historic hall where humans had signed peace treaties for centuries. Today, he was signing one with aliens. Across the table sat the Vraxian High Command and representatives from the Galactic Council. They all looked uncomfortable. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The Vraxians should have conquered Earth easily. Instead, they were surrendering. Article 1, Kyung-soo read from the treaty document. The Vraxian Dominion and its allies acknowledge Earth as a sovereign and independent power. No species represented by the Galactic Council shall attempt to conquer, colonize, or otherwise subjugate humanity. War leader Thax, sitting with his fellow commanders, felt his pride burning. But he nodded. They had no choice. Humanity had captured 3 Vraxian worlds, destroyed 40% of their fleet, and turned their supply lines into shooting galleries. Article 2, Kyung-soo continued. The Vraxian Dominion shall pay reparations to Earth for damages caused during their unprovoked attack. This includes reconstruction costs for Seoul and other affected cities. Council leader Vex spoke up. Ambassador Kyung-soo, these terms are quite harsh. Perhaps we could negotiate. No, Kyung-soo said simply. You attacked us. We won. These are our terms. You can accept them, or we can resume hostilities. Your choice. The bluntness shocked the council members. Most species approached diplomacy with politeness and careful language. Humans just stated facts. The treaty was signed. Earth was now officially recognized as a galactic power. But recognition came with responsibilities and dangers. Colonel Jiwoo addressed the Galactic Council a week later. She had been asked to explain human military philosophy so the Council could understand what they were dealing with. You want to know why you lost? She asked the assembled representatives. I'll tell you. You've been at peace for too long. You forgot what war really means. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's history, images of battles, sieges, and campaigns spanning millennia. Humans have never had long peace. We've been fighting continuously for 10,000 years. Rome fell and medieval kingdoms rose. Those fell and nations were born. World wars killed millions. We've perfected warfare in ways you can't imagine because you haven't needed to. An image appeared showing ancient battles. We learned tactics from trying to kill each other with swords and shields. We learned logistics from marching armies across continents. We learned strategy from chess games and military academies. Modern warfare appeared on the display. Tanks, aircraft, missiles. Then we industrialized war. We built factories that produced weapons by the millions. We developed doctrines for every type of combat: naval, aerial, ground, urban, guerrilla. We created entire academic fields studying how to fight better. Jiwoo paused, letting it sink in. And when we reached space, we took all that knowledge with us. Every lesson learned from 10,000 years of killing each other, we applied to defending ourselves from you. She showed footage from the war, human tactics that had confused and defeated the Vraxians. You sent soldiers trained for standard combat. We sent soldiers trained to fight in cities, jungles, deserts, mountains, tundra, and space. You used tactics from your military manuals. We used tactics from Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Rommel, and 100 other military thinkers you've never heard of. A council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature, spoke. Are you saying humans are naturally better at war? No, Jiwoo replied. We're naturally worse at it. We're weak, slow, and fragile. That's why we had to get so good at it. Strong species can afford to be simple. Weak species have to be clever or they die out. The council understood now. They had awakened something dangerous, not because humans were warriors, but because humans were survivors. And survivors learned to use every advantage, every trick, every weapon they could find. Captain Tae-sung returned to Earth as a hero. The media wanted to interview him. Politicians wanted to shake his hand, but he just wanted to go home. He had been in space or on battlefields for 6 months straight. In a quiet cafe in Seoul, he met with Sergeant Dong-hyun and Major Yuna. The city had been rebuilt, but you could still see scars from the battle. Some buildings were new, standing next to old ones with patched-up damage. What do you think happens now? Yuna asked. Tae-sung sipped his coffee before answering. We become what we fought to avoid. The galaxy knows about us now. They know we're dangerous. Some will want to be our allies. Others will want to destroy us before we become a threat. So the war isn't really over, Dong-hyun said. No, it's just beginning. This was just the introduction. He was right. Across the galaxy, species were reevaluating their positions. The Kelthian Empire quietly sent diplomatic messages to Earth, proposing trade agreements. The Morphid Collective hired human military advisors to train their forces. Even the peaceful Gentle Ones requested human guards for their merchant ships. Earth had become the galaxy's military experts almost overnight. Dr. Bora proposed something called the Human Solution at a council session. She stood before representatives from dozens of species explaining her idea. Most of you have been at peace for generations, she said. You've forgotten how to fight effectively, but humans remember. We've never stopped studying warfare. She displayed charts showing conflict resolution across the galaxy before and after Earth's introduction. You have a problem. When conflicts arise between species, they escalate quickly because nobody knows how to fight limited wars. You either have peace or total destruction. Humans know how to fight wars with rules, how to apply just enough force to achieve objectives without destroying everything, how to negotiate from positions of strength. The proposal was simple. Humanity would offer military consulting services to the galaxy, not mercenaries who fought for money, but advisors who taught strategy, tactics, and the art of measured force. Some council members were horrified. You want to spread your violent knowledge? Better we teach controlled violence than you stumble into uncontrolled destruction, Bora replied. Would you rather learn from experts or learn by making catastrophic mistakes? The proposal passed. Earth Military Academy opened branches on allied worlds, teaching the lessons humanity had learned through bloody experience. 20 years passed. Private Jae-ho, now Sergeant Jae-ho, stood in front of a classroom of young recruits. Some were human, but others were aliens of various species. The Galactic Council had approved exchange programs, allowing other species to learn from human military expertise. "Today we're studying the Battle of Seoul," Jae-ho told his students. "I was there, a scared private who barely knew which end of the rifle to point at the enemy." He showed footage of the battle. His students watched as human forces turned a city into a trap, defeated a superior enemy, and did it all while following rules of engagement. "Notice what we didn't do," Jae-ho said. "We didn't use nuclear weapons in the city. We didn't execute prisoners. We warned civilians and let them evacuate. We fought hard, but we fought clean." A young Vraxian cadet raised his claw. "Instructor? Why? You could have won faster with more brutal methods." Jae-ho looked at the Vraxian student. 20 years ago, they would have been enemies. Now he was teaching Vraxian youth how humans thought about warfare. "Because wars end," Jae-ho explained. "And after they end, you have to live with what you did. We could have been monsters and maybe won faster, but then we'd be monsters forever. We chose to be soldiers instead. Soldiers who follow rules, even when it's harder." In the council chamber, Ambassador Kyung-soo had become one of the most influential voices. Earth didn't have the largest population or the strongest economy, but they had expertise everyone needed. "The trade dispute between the Kelthians and the Morphids is escalating," Vex informed him. "They're mobilizing fleets. We fear war." Kyung-soo reviewed the situation. "Send in human mediators. We've dealt with worse. And remind both sides that if they start a war, Earth will intervene. Not on either side, but to stop it. They can negotiate now, or we'll force them to negotiate later after they've wasted resources on pointless fighting." It was a new role for humanity, not conquerors, but peacekeepers. Not because humans were peaceful, but because they understood the cost of war better than anyone. Colonel Ji-woo, now a general, wrote a report on humanity's first 20 years as a galactic power. She sat in her office, looking at Earth through the window. The planet that had almost been conquered now stood as one of the galaxy's key powers. Her report concluded with a warning. Humanity's greatest strength is also our greatest danger. We're good at war because we've practiced for millennia. But that same expertise could make us arrogant. We must remember that every species we teach, every conflict we resolve, and every battle we fight changes who we are. We became strong by being weak. We must not forget what it means to be vulnerable, or we'll become the same threat to others that the Vraxians were to us. Far out in the galaxy, in a Vraxian military academy, Commander Thax taught a class of cadets. He had been allowed to return to service after the war, though his rank had been reduced. "Today's lesson is simple," he told his students. "Never underestimate your enemy." "I made that mistake. I thought humans were weak because they were soft. I learned they were strong because they were smart." He showed footage of human soldiers fighting, thinking, adapting. "They defeated us not with strength but with cleverness. They turned weakness into advantage. They used tactics we'd never seen, and they did it all while following a moral code that we didn't expect." One student asked, "Do you hate them, Commander?" Thax considered the question carefully. "No. I respect them. They beat us fairly. They treated prisoners well. They stopped fighting as soon as we surrendered. They're warriors like us, but better at it." He pulled up the final slide of his presentation. It showed a simple message that had become famous across the galaxy, words spoken by a human general. "We didn't want this war, but we were ready for it anyway. That's the difference between hoping for peace and preparing for war. We do both." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity wasn't the strongest species, the smartest, or the most advanced, but they were the most dangerous in one specific way. They understood war completely, both its necessity and its horror, and that understanding made them the perfect species to prevent it. As Earth celebrated 20 years of peace with the galaxy, fireworks lit up the night sky over Seoul. In the rebuilt city, humans and aliens walked together, trading, talking, and learning from each other. The scars of war had healed, but the lessons remained. Somewhere in the city, an old recording played on a memorial stone. It was Colonel Jiwoo's voice from the first day of the war. They thought we were fragile. They learned we were resilient. They thought we were weak. They learned we were prepared. They thought we were prey. They learned we were survivors. And survivors, above all else, refused to die quietly.